Welcome back, everyone, to Merge Conflict, your weekly developer podcasting about all things in the world of development and software engineering and Apple devices. Now, Frank, we're recording this early, but we had this great episode, and I'm putting great in quotes, about us rumoring, and we still don't have the devices because we're recording this way super early for reasons unknown to most people, but we're excited to have updates. How many devices did you order last week from the event, Frank?
Well, as usual, I intended to order the iPhone the moment it was available, but as usual, I slept and forgot all about it, and then I'll be getting it, somewhere late December or something like that. I'll be getting an
Perfect.
iPhone 16. Really looking forward to it. Um, Classic Frank.
Classic
So
Frank.
I'm gonna have Dumb Dingus, I guess, for quite a while. But I'll
Well,
be jealous of all you with Smart Dinguses.
I don't know if I'm ever going to get a smart dingus, but we will see if I do at one point, and Heather would get it. And then maybe I'll get it a few years later. Then by then we'll be on Apple super intelligence, but we'll see what happens. All right. Well, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit of VS Code. As you know, Frank, I've recently, because you follow my YouTube intensely, I assume, as you may know, I've been putting out quite a few videos on both the James Watson Magnet YouTube and the .NET YouTube on VS Code, specifically because it's a great time, especially on my Mac, to cleanse and get kind of next generation VS Code, all the development software set up. We talked about it in a previous podcast. I talked about the .NET Maui podcast and a bunch of other stuff. But today, I wanted to do a drive-by of maybe some of our favorite features that we've been playing around with since going deep into the VS Code train. Now, of course, I use Visual Studio all the time on Windows, but I also use Visual Studio Code a lot on my Mac and on my Windows machine as well. And there's a bunch of goodies. Frank, I want to start first and foremost with hot news from
Oh boy.
a month ago at this point when this podcast comes out. New updates for the C# dev kit, which is what we use in correlation with the .NET Maui toolkit and all the other goodies that are out there. A whole bunch of goodies in this one, some quality of life stuff, but some big ones. If you are a Blazor Razor developer, well, guess what? Brand new improved IntelliSense and Razor error management built right in. So that's good to go.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Before the Maui, before the killing of Visual Studio for Mac, I used VS Code mostly for web development. That it was my C# console app and C# web app development environment, and so it's really close to home for me. I've been using their great Razor support for a while now, so just keeps getting better as usual. Pretty good.
Yeah, it's nice. Some other nice quality of life improvements in this puppy. This one's actually really nice because unlike Visual Studio Code obviously is a lightweight code editor, which means you can open random files and things in it all the time. And one thing that I like that Wendy called out on this blog post, and they said, another top feedback item is IntelliSense doesn't work. That's just top level feedback. And apparently what they found out, and this is really cool from the blog post, is apparently what they found out is that often there are files that are being opened that aren't in the solution. Right. So the C# dev kit doesn't have those files loaded, and they're using the fallback generic stuff. So they've added a little indicator that says when you open a file, how many projects that file is in.
I see. Gotcha. Yeah. It was worse before the Copilot days. Now that we have AIs and they don't really care. They don't need to know your project. They just figure it out by context. This was a bigger deal. I remember I was even for Continuous, my IDE, I was really debating how to handle this. If someone just opens a random file, what should you do? You want to hook it up to a semantic model. You want to open up some musings. You want to reference some DLLs. You want to do all that, but it's just some random file off of a computer. You don't know what to enable. In the case of Continuous, it enables pretty much everything. That was my decision. I didn't know what else to do in that case, so I just light up everything. I add a reference to every package. There we go. This is probably a more sane, probably a more rational solution than just reference every NuGet on the computer.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. I like that they did that too. So that's cool. Another nice little quality of life improvement is they're often creating new projects, Frank. And what did they update and change here?
No, you stole the words literally out of my mouth. I was gonna say quality of life improvement, but I had nothing to do with project. It was just setting the stupid debug configuration,
Which
setting up
also
the
is in new
launch.
projects. It's also a new project, so you can call
Okay,
that
fair
out.
enough. Well, there was this weird dichotomy because forever VS Code has had their launch config files, launch JSON or whatever it is, and but then the C sharp and especially the Maui toolkit on top of the C sharp dev kit had this magic F5 button that was just like,
Hmm.
whatever, man, we're just gonna make it run. You don't need no launch config. We're
Yeah.
past that, man. We're just gonna make it run. And you're like, yeah, but what and where? And it's like, don't worry about it. You're like, but I am worried about it.
It's doing it. It's just
So
going to happen. It's just going to
it's
happen,
just gonna
Frank.
happen, man. So I really appreciate them giving us a few more controls because I like controls and I do like magic and I do like automatic. I do. I really do. But I also like to have the controls on the side. So the way I'm reading this is more easy launch configuration for setting up exactly what you want to run.
Exactly. Like if you have HTTP and HTTPS out of the box, they'll both show up there. And this is also where they're sort of doing the, that little squiggly bracket. It's a fascinating use of that, but it is sort of the setting configuration thing next to C sharp. And that's where you can set the startup project and also the launch config. And in Maui case, you also select like the device you want to go to, right? So that device was kind of doing the launch configuration, say, oh, let me pick an Android
Yeah.
device. Let me do that. Let me do an iPhone. Let me do that. And it would kind of work. So it's nice to have that more fine grained control for all C sharp projects.
Yeah, especially because C sharp projects and solutions can be so wild in what configuration actually means.
Mm-hmm.
Configuration is just some random variable. You can set it to whatever you want. And so some people do. Some people do crazy things with their configurations. They have really wild things. I tend to be very conservative. But I remember even back in the day when I was doing builds on my own machine, I would have 4 or 5 different configurations of the
Yeah.
app, dev signed, production not signed, weird things like that.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm glad we're not living in that world
Yeah.
anymore. Now I just CI/CD everything and hope it all just works.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very true. Like I never really felt like there was a release mode in VS Code. Now it feels like you can actually set that up accordingly and make things
Yeah,
work, which is
exactly.
nice. Yeah. Well, projects. Now, when you create projects, Frank, you can select a bunch of the optional settings. They're now available in the drop down. That's kind of nice, just like the CLI or VS. You get the little options there. You can select the target
Thank
framework if it's
goodness.
HTTPS, other options. So many options, Frank.
Good. Yeah.
It's cool. We did it.
Look,
Yeah.
as a console user, I hate console options, especially. Every time I do .NET New, I don't know if you do this, but I always do .NET New all by itself first
Yeah.
because I can never remember the name of anything. And
Yeah.
so I'm always and then I look through the list. I'm like, oh, look at all the fun kind of projects I can create. And then I just create class lib because that's all I ever create. But
Well, and that's why I like actually the C Sharp Dev Kit inside of VS Code because that's almost always what I do too. I do .NET New. I don't know what it's called, but like
yeah.
literally all that VS Code's doing, right, is it's iterating over that list and then displaying it,
Hmm.
and then displaying the options in a nice user friendly way, which is I like it. I like a nice GUI, Frank. I know I like a
No
nice GUI.
kidding.
I like GUI.
I know it's just a text editor, but stop using that excuse. We're all using it as an IDE. It's an IDE. Stop hiding behind it's just a text editor, man.
Well, it is
But
now, Frank, because you can drag and drop files in the Solution Explorer. I'm super excited about this. It finally happened. Whoop whoop.
I can't believe it. Does that mean they're finally going to have F sharp support for the file ordering in F sharp? That's always a thing.
I guess Ionide or whatever still is the F sharp solution,
That's
correct? Have you
true.
used it? Yeah.
Ionide supports it. You're right. You're
Yeah.
right. Drag and drop, baby. Can you believe it? 2024. All it took was a feature from 1992 Visual Basic.
I'm
Um,
I and I don't know. Obviously, like the C Sharp Dev Kit, stuff's open source and things like that. I haven't looked at it because like I've never built a VS Code extension that's like as complex as the C Sharp Dev Kit, right? So I don't
mhm.
know what kind of magic and coding needs to go into supporting that stuff. But I imagine if they didn't do it right away, it probably wasn't the easiest thing in the world not necessarily the drag and drop part, but like maybe like the hooks or something. So very fascinating.
Well, it's all a complicated world, that extension world, because there's definitely a UI kit that they want you to use, but in the
Mm,
end, it's all just HTML. You can do whatever you want. I think the trick in VS Code is keeping that lightweight feel to it, where it never locks up, it never beach balls in Mac parlance.
yeah.
Um, so I think the hard part, speaking of someone who's written a solution manager with drag and drop, the hard part is keeping it responsive, because when someone's dragging a file around, you actually want to query the program database and see, like, is this a valid drop target, blah blah
Yeah.
blah, check on this, check on that. So um they're little minor features. I'm joking, it's been around since Visual Basic, but at the same time, yeah, it's a funny HTML editor that we're all building these extensions in. It's a small miracle any of it works.
Yeah. It's kind of wild. Anyways, go grab it. Go grab the updates. I just have automatic updates turned on. So things are always happening. But check out this .NET blog and all the goodness. I'm always on the pre-release anyway. So I've been playing with this stuff forever. So
Yeah.
let's live life.
You live the dangerous life. I don't. I'm just like, never update, please.
Well,
Unless, like,
I told you, Frank, you can create profiles inside of VS
yeah.
Code, and you can have a pre-release profile and a non-pre-release profile. You can
Now you're
toggle back
managing
and forth.
two versions.
No,
That's
you're
so
not. You're
many
just
versions.
toggling. It's not even managing. It's
Uh,
fine. Come on now.
no, I auto update my extensions too, obviously, because who knows what's going on there. You got to keep up with the VS Code. It updates every month.
Got to do it. All right, your turn. That's my favorite. That's one of my. Yeah, we're all using that, so I want to talk about the new
Yeah,
features, the new hotness.
this is
Frank, you
fun.
had
We're
some.
we're doing we're
Yeah.
doing like extensions episode number 2, because
Dun,
mine's an
dun.
extension, and I just want to bring it up because it's been good to me. It's been helping me. It's made me a better person. That's not true at all. It's called, and actually, I'm not even sure if an extension or if it's like actually baked into VS Code. It was very unclear if I installed this or not. Remote SSH. We all
Mm-hmm.
know. We all know what SSH is. Here's my scenario. I am a Linux hacksaw, and I have many a remote Linux hacksoring machines, and I'm logging into them, I'm coding, and I'm using VI. And then to edit my text files, because I'm a hacksaw. But then I'm like, but it's not 1990. Why am I using VI? This is silly. This doesn't make any sense. It's 2024. I should be using an advanced code editor that pretends to be an IDE with an AI behind it. I should be using that. So I want to use VS Code to edit my Hacksaw Linux files. How do you do it, James? How do you do it? This is one of those silly problems that was solved in the 70s. We used to have network file systems, but then someone's like, well, maybe network file systems should be secure and they shouldn't just pass all your data in plain text across the network. And people are like, fine. And then we haven't had network file shares ever since, because people implement security models that don't work, and nothing works and nothing ever works. So, forever, I did the worst possible thing you can do as a Linux hacksaw, and I opened up Samba ports on these machines, and
Oh
I ran,
yeah.
oh yeah, ran Samba, the open source SMB implementation. And I don't really get SMB credentials and sharing permissions, and it's there's a config file and it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's
And
bad.
so I just open it all up. I'm just like, wide open, baby. I mean, I put a password on it, but probably guess. No, I'm just kidding. You'll never get
Frank.
my password. Anyway, this was a terrible lifestyle, because Mac, no matter how many incantations you give it, will not always stay
Mm,
connected to a network share. I wish it would.
yeah.
Um, it'll stay connected 90% of the time, but not 100. And every so often, you just have to click around and things get lost and your SMB share disappears. It's very annoying. Anyone who's done any kind of network file share knows my pain.
Yeah.
Why is it 2024 and these stupid things still don't work? I don't get it. But anyway, as an alternative, James, that was my preamble. Have you heard of remote SSH?
I have, and surprisingly, I have not actually played around with it too much, but I often play around with it because there's actually a remote development extension pack, which has WSL, dev containers, remote SSH,
Ah.
and remote tunnels all bundled into one. But there's a lot more. There's like a remote explorer and remote SSH editing configuration files, a whole bunch more. What did you actually install, Frank?
Remote SSH
Okay.
itself. I believe
Just the
that's
solo dolo.
that's all I need. And it was actually kind of like one of those moments where like no one told me about this. I was just doing this terrible samba dance that I was talking about.
Mm,
And I'm sitting there thinking like SSH is working fine because I'm logged into all these terminals and I'm like, this part's working fine. And I know you can transfer files over SSH. It's just a stupid terminal connection.
yeah.
You can do all sorts of things over SSH. I'm like, wouldn't it be great if VS Code could just SSH into a machine and just like just do it? Like just stop bothering me. The SSH part is working. Like why am I bothering with all this Samba stuff and all that? Like
Yeah.
just do it over that secure tunnel. And it was just one of those fun moments. Like I must have installed it or I came with like something else because I just shift command P SSH remote SSH add host. Yes, I will add a host.
Mm,
Type in host name. I set up my SSH properly with public key stuff, whatever, so I don't have to type in a password or anything. I have no
nice.
idea if it works if you have to do a password. Good luck. Um, typed in the host name, and it's like, all right, buddy, bling, and a new VS Code window appears, and it's like,
Wow.
we're remoted in. We're installing stuff now. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you installing on my Linux Haxor machine? This is a very sensitive machine. I have no idea what it's doing. I would like to talk to you a little bit about that a little bit. But isn't that cool that they're like, it does the obvious thing. Like, yes, I have an SSH tunnel to my machine. Could you just use that and not
Yeah.
make me install a million other things, please?
My assumption of what it's doing, because this is similar to like dev containers and also
Yeah.
code spaces. And my assumption is what it's doing is once you're connected to that machine, it's for all intents and purposes like kind of creating a flavor of VS Code, kind of like a profile for that SSH connection. So I think it has profiles, so to whatever it's
Yeah.
connected on. Because the whole idea there is that you're now on that machine, right? So if you do LS or you do cat or
Yeah.
whatever, like you're in that machine, which means if you had .NET installed on the machine, you could say .NET new, and it would list the templates from that machine, not the
Hmm.
other machine. So now the shell of VS Code and all the extensions aren't the extensions that are on your current machine. It's on what's
Yeah.
on that machine, which is kind of wild because like the
It
shell
is.
of VS Code is running there, but a bunch of other stuff is now running on that machine through SSH and running those commands. So it's setting up infrastructure to basically connect and do that. And that's sort of how dev containers work, right? When you set up a dev
Yeah.
container, it's like, wait a second, all these extensions are different. Oh, because those are the extensions inside the container. Like
Yeah.
they're in the container configuration that you're building inside of. So it's kind of crazy in that regard. So I think that's what it's doing at
Well,
least.
it gets even crazier, and I really don't want to talk about this because I don't understand it. But there is an advanced scenario where you're using dev containers and remote SSH, and I'm just like, stop it.
Then,
Just enough. Okay, enough.
oh my
I
goodness.
can't handle sandboxes within my sandboxes within my sandboxes. Stop it. So let's
Well,
not talk about that. I just want to put it out there. There is this weird advanced scenario
I
you can
was
do.
I was one time. I don't think I posted it. Now Docker Desktop is like available on
Yeah.
Windows ARM 64 machines. But there was
Oh,
a point in time where I needed Docker and I couldn't use Podman for some reason, and I don't know why. But what I did is I booted up WSL, and then I installed Docker inside of WSL, and then I
yeah,
pointed
exactly.
VS Code inside of WSL to the Docker, like layers upon layers deep. And inside of that Docker, I ran my dev container.
Yeah, the insanity starts to hit you because, again, all I did was shift command P. Do you want to connect a host? And I'm just
Yeah,
like, I'm just falling down the rabbit hole with Alice here. Like I'm just keeping my mind open. I'm open to new experiences and all that. But
yeah,
I didn't realize it was like, yeah, they created. I don't know if it's a profile or they even have a different abstraction for it, but yeah, it's a whole different set of extensions. I
yeah,
noticed it right away when Copilot wasn't working. I'm like, wait a minute. there's something wrong with this editor. It's not doing my work for me. And so you have to go to extensions and install Copilot. You have to install the C Sharp Dev Kit. You have to install manually. So yeah, it has that same flavor as dev kits. What else did it remind me of? Whenever you're at GitHub and you press the period button, you
Hmm.
know how you're given basically a blank
Yep.
scenario there. So I think in the background, it is running some kind of VS Code server on that machine. I think it ships over a little bit of code and starts executing, but it's a little vague to me. So I'd appreciate if anyone could throw in some real details. But at least at the UI level, it says it's uploading a server and executing a server. So there's at least something lightweight happening.
Yeah.
So the first good thing that happens is they'll just bring up a terminal. So this is kind of fun because VS Code has a pretty decent baked in terminal. And if I just want to like SSH into my Linux Haxor machine, then Shift Command P and I can just log into my Linux Haxor machine and I have my terminal there. Like all
Oh,
the fancy features of VS Code aside, like that's just kind of nice.
yeah.
It's just up there ready to go, all saved away, all the credentials are all set to go. So I appreciated that. It falls down in one part. It doesn't remember. It doesn't have its own recent file list. You know how you like go up to the file menu and you got your recent files and your recent directories that
Mm,
you've opened. It doesn't do that. And it
mm,
doesn't open your old ones. So anytime you want to go open something, you have to hit the open folder button and then you have to navigate through the entire file system hierarchy every single time. And if
wow.
you're like me and your Linux Haxor machines crash all the time and you're constantly restarting them, this gets a little tedious after a
Uh,
while.
I bet there's
So
an
that part's,
extension that does that. That's for
oh,
sure.
I'm sure. Open project. Yeah, there probably is a stupid open project extension out there. I'll have to look that one up and report back. So honestly though, that was basically my biggest complaint. My secondary complaint is it is to a normal computer, to a normal server, to like my Linux Hexor machines. This is all perfectly fine. It's doing a bit of work over there on the server, but not too much, and the server can
Yeah.
handle it. I did notice if I had a Raspberry Pi though, and I underpowered it, you
Mm,
can do these mean little things to them. And as long as you're not using too much Wi-Fi or anything, it's fine. So I'm SSHing, I'm coding, everything's cool. But then I open VS Code against that little Raspberry Pi, and all of a sudden its CPU goes up and its Wi-Fi goes up
interesting.
dramatically, and it just starts sucking down a bunch of power. And I don't
Mm,
let it, so it crashes. Blah blah blah. I just thought it was kind of funny. So, remote SSH is doing a bit of work over on the server at initialization time just to get it up and running.
yeah.
But once it's there, everything works very smoothly, and I found it to be just a really enjoyable experience.
Can you like transfer files from
Yeah.
machine to machine?
Yeah, the drag and drop is wonky, but works.
Okay.
That yeah, that honestly, I do most everything through Git when I'm
Yeah.
doing this kind of code. I use Git as my file transfer service. It's a little
Well,
terrible, but it
because
works.
here's why I ask is like there was like a video file that I recorded on my Mac.
Right.
Okay, so I recorded my screen for one of the videos I did, and I was like, how do I get this video from my Mac to my Windows
Right.
machine?
Right.
now, now in this case, like you have to open up like a Samba like
No.
SMB file
Yeah.
transfer port thingy between Windows and Mac, right? Like I can't, there's some file share, I think, and maybe it's not Samba. I don't know what it is. It's some weird file transfer
Right.
protocol thing. They really don't want you to use it. But I was thinking, like what I do today, by the way, is I don't use that. I upload it to OneDrive and then I download it to OneDrive. And that's a waste of bandwidth,
It's
in my
terrible.
opinion.
Yeah.
Waste of bandwidth. What if I could have VS Code on both machines and I could SSH in? I could be like, oh, put it over there on my Windows machine.
Yeah. So I can't answer your question because my experience is limited, and I didn't try. I definitely didn't try moving like big
Hmm.
files over, and I can't remember if I moved small files over.
Okay.
But I will say, you can do file transfer over SSH. So the famous rsync tool on all computers, every computer has it. Windows, you have to go download it, but whatever,
Oh,
rsync. Um, rsync can work over SSH, and rsync just copies files. That's all it
Oh,
does. It just copies files really well.
cool.
And so I don't want to say every program can do it because it has to be a smart program and someone had to code it and make it happen, but it's all
Yeah.
doable. So
Hmm.
you don't have to open the Samba. Uh, Alternatively, you could have secure FTP, but that's another server daemon running on my Linux Haxor machine I'm not comfortable with. I barely like having SSH open, you know?
Yeah.
And so don't make me open another port. And so it's just I want to funnel everything that I can through SSH. And there are file transfer protocols. So get yourself a better file transfer software. If you're on the
FTP.
Mac, I recommend Cyberduck.
Okay. I was just thinking FileZilla, but let's figure it out.
FileZilla is good. Haven't used that one in a while. Can that do SSH file copies? I'm not sure.
It probably can. I mean, obviously it does FTP because that's what it's known for,
Yeah.
but it might be
Yeah.
able to. I mean, back in the day, that is how I deployed my website was FileZilla,
Oh
copying files
yeah.
over. It's the grand old days. That's just tried and true. Okay. Well,
Well,
I'm going to definitely go try out that other stuff too. I mean, for me, I've been using obviously quite a lot of the C# stuff, but I've also been, we just did a video with Bandy who made this extension, which you were talking about the C# dev kit and those profiles. One of the things, like when it comes to mobile development, is actually bundling, packaging, signing your applications. I may have talked about it or may not have, I forget. But there is, if you type Maui into VS Code, there is the .NET Maui archive and publish tool. And I want to call out, if you go to the GitHub repo and you look at merged pull requests, which I'm going to
oh
post in here,
boy.
number
Oh boy.
22, somebody
Somebody.
wrote a little code.
A lot of
This
code or
guy.
a little code? Let's find out.
Uh, plus
Mm.
29 minus 7. Not bad. Uh, yeah. So
Some
it's good.
fascinating minor. Ooh, so changing some Apple paths here. I'm a little bit nervous, you know. Oh, I'm sorry, Android commands. This is
Yes.
Android changes. Oh boy. Yep, key tool. Someday I will understand how Android signing works. Not today
So what happened here is I was doing a video with Bandy. I was trying out the extension, and for some reason, I couldn't get it to work on my machine for Android. Yeah, so this extension is really cool. In my video, for Android and iOS, for iOS, you got to do profiles and certificates, and it'll actually show you everything on your machine just from VS Code, which is cool.
though. Fantastic.
Which is cool. And then you can also archive your iOS and Android applications, and you can pick the profiles. Super rad. And then it calls the right commands. For Android, you can create a key store, and then it signs it with the key store. Now, the
Yeah.
problem I had was that the key tool, however he had it set up, I think it was assuming that the Java Home or something else was set up correct on his machine. So I looked at it, and in my original commits, I think he changed my commits. He might have committed to it,
Oh, okay.
but I figured out how to basically get an environment variable out of the system, for the key tool for the Java home path, and then
Right.
use that and then configure it. So he ended up figuring out what's going on in it. But I wrote a little JavaScript, because it's a VS Code extension, and I added into it. I figured it all out, and it's a pretty cool extension that's open source that is out into the world. So give it a look, I would say. And that's one that I've been exploring.
Yeah, I how did we miss this in the previous episode, and why didn't you tell me about this sooner? Because I definitely
Oops.
want to play around with this puppy.
Yeah.
Uh, this is cool. I'm still not seeing Java path. Anyone who's done Java knows you got to Java path these things. I'm not seeing it in your code, man. I
I
don't
think
know.
that
Did this thing
he
really pass review?
so I think he reviewed it, and then he improved it and did some other stuff. But if
Uh,
you look at my original commit, I do a get key tool path, and I look to see if it's configured. Then I grab the Java home. It was funny because then he said, "Oh, actually, I broke it in my last fix, and you found this. I'm going to fix it in my other area, and then do this other thing." So, anyways, I wrote a little bit of code. It's in there. It's happening, et cetera, et cetera. So it's good.
it always feels good to contribute to open source, right?
Yeah.
Like I have so many open source projects, but like I don't contribute to other people's projects enough because honestly, it's a hassle. So, congratulations on actually putting together a PR and getting it approved, I guess. I
Got it
mean,
approved. And what if I told you that I did the entire pull request using vscode.dev? I just hit the dot button. I did it all in the browser with no IntelliSense.
how
And I
did you know
didn't,
it worked? How'd you
I,
test it, sir?
well, if you look, this is how you know it's a good PR. Look at the first comment. Fixes number 21, which is a issue I opened. I
Yeah.
haven't tested this, but I think it's pretty close.
Hashtag not an AI.
And then if you look at Bandy, he's like, thanks for your effort. Almost. Oops.
Classic maintainer response.
Almost. So close. So close. Let me rewrite
But
all your code.
honestly, like sometimes that's what it takes. Like as a maintainer, you're really not sure what to work on. Sometimes, like you can be overwhelmed by a huge list of bugs. But if
Yeah.
someone gives you a PR, that means they're passionate enough to like they want this thing fixed. And even
Yeah.
if their code is, you know, not what you would write, you're like, okay, well, at least I'll take the time and write this the way I think it should be written because I see there's someone passionate about it. Like it all makes sense. This is how open source code works. So just cool
Yeah.
to see the system operating.
Now there's another one I'll tell you about that I did my like favorite VS Code extensions for .NET MAUI. So there is an extension. Okay. It's just called Android iOS Emulator. That's what it's called. It's a terrible name. Okay.
Does it emulate an Android device on iOS or an iOS device on Android, or does it just open the simulator? It's called on iOS.
All it does is show you what it does. What I like about this is it puts a phone icon in the top right next to the play button. And what it does is you can click on it and it will show you all of your iOS or Android devices that you can launch automatically.
Why isn't it there? Why doesn't the MAUI extension have that? Okay, great. Fantastic.
Well,
Thank you,
the
James.
MAUI, so the MAUI extension does, but you select it and then debug. This allows you to select it and launch it ahead of time.
Okay. Wait, what? Tell me again. James,
okay.
You confused me. I was with you until you explained it.
So often I like to start my Android emulators and iOS simulators like ahead of time.
Uh-huh.
Like pick them out, the one that's live, that's running.
I got you.
So this allows you to run them, not debug to them. Now, if you are using .NET MAUI,
boot them up.
You can just hit it. It'll show you all your emulators and simulators you can pick from it, but it won't start until you debug your application. But this is nice because, for example, let's say you're doing a demo and you're like, I want to open up the emulator ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then you can then do it, and then it's up and running.
I don't know. I got into this habit years ago. I always open the simulators, emulators manually. Mm-hmm. I never let the IDE do it. No. I think because back in the day, they honestly used to be pretty buggy. Like the whole like starting up the simulator and launching the app would never quite always work. So just so many years ago, I got into the habit of always manually launching simulators and emulators. So that's funny. Other people share my neurosis. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. And the same thing.
We all have trust issues.
There's another one. So there's one called ADB interface for VS Code. And what this does is it's just ADB commands, the Android debug bridge to like list devices, kill devices, connect to devices.
You mentioned this one. Now you're repeating yourself, old man.
There you go. All this goodness.
You do love it though. I know because who can remember all the ADB commands? So we were making the point last time, and we'll make it again because that's how we do this. UIs are good. We both like visual IDEs, as much of command line stuff as I want. Buttons are better.
Anything else you got?
Just buttons are better. We'll end on a high note.
Cool. All right. Well, let us know what your favorite VS Code extensions are for any type of development or just SSH type of crazy terminal stuff. Go over to our YouTube, youtube.com/@mergeconflictfm. You can leave us a comment. We super appreciate it. You can like, subscribe, do all the stuff. You can, of course, share the podcast, download the podcast on any of your favorite podcast applications like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your Android podcasts. I think YouTube Music maybe, or maybe I use Pocket Casts, or maybe, other ones, whatever you use. You just download it and give us a review. We totally like that. All right. That's going to do it for this week's Merge Conflict. So until next time, I'm James Montemagno.
And I'm Frank Kruger. Thanks for watching and listening.
Peace.